Welcome back to Attack 404. We're going to go over the incident response plan or policy in part 4. So let's get straight to it. One of the things in the incident response policy is going to have to be around data collection and how you collect that data and from what operating systems you will be collecting that data from. I left these blank because we're going to be going through and evolving the series to do incident response on different operating systems and show you what that would look like in Windows operating systems, obviously Linux, the Mac ecosystem, which I'm putting together, Windows servers, Linux servers, and all that fun stuff. And then finally, the SIEM solutions that you use and how we could go about using those SIEM solutions and finding the information that we need during the investigation process in an active incident, breach, or more commonly, an event. Here you can see we have different points to consider. If we're using Splunk, anything that covers the endpoint is going to be listed in this section. I've broken it down a little bit better. And then that'll also give us the additional indexes that some of those dashboards might use. You can have other tools in here like Carbon Black and the search indexes for Carbon Black and plugging in various indicators of compromise. And that could be domains, IP addresses, and even hashes to find. So you'll normally want to put all that information down in here, what you need to look for and things like that. And also, some of the things you might want to consider is a legal hold. And if users have access to certain services and features, let's say Slack, Dropbox, you might want to see if they've been accessing them and also put a hold on those as well so that they're not deleting or moving things in that location to kind of hide. So when we start to engage business continuity and disaster recovery, we need to consider what and how we define a disaster event. And in this section, we're going to take a look at the workflow for getting BCDR involved in our process. If an event comes in and we deem it that it is a breach, we then start going down the pike to see if it's mission critical. If not, then we don't have to engage BCDR. We could potentially reimage. And mission critical could include any of the indexes and matrices that we came out with. If it is mission critical, is it financial? Yes, then we have to decide to engage BCDR at a specific time or within a specific set of days. If that's no, is it a database or other critical system? If it's yes, it gets punted back up to BCDR. If it is a VP, we also have to engage BCDR. Is there a time limit on there? Is there other things that we have to consider with the VP? And then from that, it goes to the report chain and the containment. Then we create a lessons learned from it. We implement those lessons learned, and then we resolve the ticket. Now, inside BCDR, there's other sections that have to come to play, and this is also going to be involved with what we discussed previously, the asset management. So in this small section, we're going to look at the asset management, and this is how that workflow would kind of sort of go. If BCDR is engaged, is the item lost, stolen, or damaged? If any of that is yes, then we go down to the next chain. Is it stolen? In normal cases, we're going to need to have a police report before we get a replacement system. And then we say yes. Then we say the system contains sensitive information. If yes, then we submit a wipe ticket. Then what ends up happening is we wait for the police report, and if it's received, then we go through the action items here. We punt that ticket over to desk side, and then the new system is dispatched to that user, and the old system is left in their ticketing or in their profiling system that we use, and it's listed as deprecated or lost, stolen, damaged, whatever the case is, and no longer in circulation. If the item is lost, it's pretty much almost the same thing. We ask for a police report, contains sensitive data, wipe it, receive the police report, do the action items, submit for a replacement system. If it's damaged, we want that item back. Because if in the event a true BCDR happens and that's a disaster, an act of God, certain things like that, we want to get that item back if it is recoverable. Because then it becomes very easy for an individual to say, oh, my $7,000 laptop got lost or destroyed and I need a new one. The business pays for a new one and now they're using a $7,000 laptop for their own pleasure rather than for business needs. So that's kind of why we have action items similar to this. When we discuss damaged items, we could then take a look at how long we want to give the individual a time frame to send that back, or we want to do it until the UPS or FedEx label is valid. If it's not, then guess what? You're getting hit with the cost of the item. In this case, we also want to look at what natural disasters that would necessitate vouching of a damaged item, or if an item becomes damaged, what is the result of that damage? Did it come from a natural disaster? Did it come from a human-made disaster? Was it operational disaster? What key items do we need in order to assess that? And then this is where a larger business continuity and disaster recovery plan would come into play, but most of the items for incident response are included. That could kind of help with recovering assets and items if in the event a disaster actually happens. And I've detailed a lot of those for you. I'm not going to cover all of them because it's quite a bit extensive. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at forensic engagement. And this is going to be up to the business, but it's going to be the business's decision based on the analysis that the L1, 2, and 3s provided and what their feedback is or what they found inside the incident response process. I know I gave an example before that if in the event we see anomalous traffic in the network, but when we put Wireshark or TCP dump on the endpoint, we don't see it. Well, if we see ports open on the network, if we're doing outside scans, but we're not seeing them open on the endpoint when we do our net stats, that could be a potential problem. Because if there's a rootkit on the system, we're really not going to be able to see much unless we're operating at the system level. But this could go deeper, and it could be hardware-based rootkits. That's something that might be firmware, and I'm not going to get into that. But the business is ultimately going to decide what they want to do in that situation, and if they want to kick it up to forensics and then ultimately BCDR. When we do look to support forensics, there's a lot of things that we need to take command of, and of them are start times when we do something and also pictures. This scenario is going to be based on and around an analyst working remotely, system somewhere else. They need to connect to it and they need to issue commands on it to get whatever information they need to support a forensics or get the data they need and then re-image the box. In this case, you're going to want to do local time, and you're also going to want to do the remote time of the box that whatever geographic location that system is in. We're also going to take note of the time when the analyst logged onto that box, and we also want pictures from start to finish that also highlight what the analyst was doing and any information that they may have procured to also demonstrate that to the higher level in the business. Command execution, and especially things that require disk writes, we want to know when those commands were executed and when they finished. I have software that helps with the incident response portion. I'll be demoing that at some time. But you do want to keep track of any and all of that, especially if you're writing scripts to help you. You'd want to log the time that the script executed and when it finished. This way they can't say that you've done other quote-unquote extracurricular activities on the machine that might hamper a forensics. Installation of tools. You should not be installing any tools with a setup because that could impact the system forensically. The other thing that we need to seriously take a look at is a lot of people will remote into a remote host, especially a Windows host, and they will use PowerShell in order to do their forensics or their incident response. While doing an incident response with PowerShell is not uncommon, what becomes a problem is if a specific commandlet is not installed, installing it and then running the commandlet becomes problematic. Because if you modify the system, you're going to enable a defending party to introduce shadow of doubt, and that could throw an entire case out the window from one simple stupid mistake. Standalone scripts and tools should be permitted so long as they're serving a specific incident response or forensics function. I don't expect, or none of you should expect, to be going out and grabbing a bunch of tools that do God knows what. And of the 15 things that they're doing, 1 or 2 of them are actually supporting incident response or forensics. That could become problematic. Remediation steps should also be clearly defined, and that would be what we do if in the event that there's malware on the system, how we re-image it, and the definition between commodity malware and targeted malware. If it's commodity malware that we see constantly, or it's well known and documented all over the internet, there's no need for us to waste time, resources, and energy in doing a forensics. We found it, we remediated it. How did it get on the box? Make a defense for it. Get the hell off the box. That's it. If in the event that we do see that things are outside the scope of commodity malware, then we can start engaging other teams to take deeper looks into things, or a deeper look into things. And also, if in the event we do procure the system to do an in-depth forensics, that we're not doing it remotely, which would be piping the image of the disk out over the internet. How do we release that system back? Where does that system go? How long does that system have to stay out of circulation if we do end up doing engaging in a court battle? All that plays into, the engagement with forensics. So the last thing that we're going to take a look at is the legal and regulatory information. And I'm going to wrap this segment up, and then I'll probably finish up with the lessons learned in another episode. So legal and regulatory is how the organization handles or has attorneys or business units that address specific locations. In this example, how we handle Europe, GDPR, all those other regulations. Who's the point of contact for certain regulatory requirements in those geographic locations? And clearly putting those out would be beneficial to the environment, because then we're not running around going crazy doing a whole bunch of stuff we really shouldn't be doing. Terms and inclusions for events. We know that the event is not impactful to the business. It's not impactful to the health. It doesn't threaten anybody or have any bodily harm attached to it. And it does not impact business data or the brand or its image or anything that could pretty much damage the reputation of the organization. Incident is any notification that has the potential to cause harm to a person's property, the brand, have brand impact, data exfiltration or unauthorized data destruction, and even access to data that people shouldn't have, abnormal disruption to any business or day-to-day operations, and leading to any financial loss or events that may cause data loss. Breach is the unauthorized access obtained by a threat actor or threat group or individual that not permitted to access data, a device, or a resource. One of the things that we need to consider is how and when analysts are going to classify an event, an incident, or a breach. The thing is, they really shouldn't. They should wait for someone higher in order to classify, because if in the event we use terms that are out of scope, like let's say we call a breach an incident or an incident a breach, that could be used against us somewhere along the line, and especially with legal, and we kind of don't want to do that. So defining those with the legal team is very important, and we kind of want to exclude that verbiage. Once we do confirm that it's a potential incident or breach, that's when we should be using those terms in our write-ups or our documentations. So with that, I'm going to cap this video series at the legal requirements. When we come back, we're going to take a look at the lessons learned, what goes into a lessons learned, and also previous videos that I've created that deal with the lessons learned and the documents and where you could find those. I'll also be putting up the incident response policy and plan in a Google Drive that you can access, take a look at, and modify, and even potentially use some of the steps or the whole plan in your organization or where you're looking to implement security. If you like the content, please like, share, and subscribe. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you back in part 5.